In 1965, the Houston Astrodome set new records for dome construction. At over 200 feet high and 710 feet wide, this giant leap in dome design was made possible with arches.
The wonderful aspect of dome action is that they allow the use of arches to create very large volumes of interior space. 300-yard football fields, 400 feet to center field, those are very long distances.
The Astrodome was made with a series of pie-shaped wedges that are built in steel, and you could picture it in some ways as a series of arches that are leaning on each other.
The point where these wedges meet is a giant metal ring, which acts as a keystone, completing the arch. The Houston Astrodome still stands today, but other domes took risks that ultimately didn't pay. Around the time the Astrodome was completed, another city began planning a similar project.
The King Dome is special because it's a pure compression dome. It was a concrete shell that was extraordinarily thin. And the problem with it is that such a thin dome over such a long span can have difficulties with buckling, the great flaw of any compression structure.
With its vertical spars and expansive interior, the King Dome served the citizens of Seattle for 24 years, but eventually closed because of water damage to its concrete roof. It was replaced with a new stadium that had a retractable cover, but for its time, it was one of the most daring concrete domes since the Pantheon. Domes continue to be used in modern construction to great effect, but the arch has found its way into other, sometimes surprising modern structures. And some arches literally do their jobs lying down. The Pantheon's dome is around 20 feet thick at the base, but only a quarter of that at its top, making the dome less heavy than it appears. The concrete near the top used volcanic pumice as an aggregate, maintaining strength while reducing weight. The arch will return on Modern Marvels, here on the History Channel. The power of the mighty Colorado River is harnessed in the American Southwest by 9 main dams. 2 of these enormous concrete structures are examples of the arch turned to a new and critical task.
An arch becomes a dam when the arch is turned on its side and has the pressure of the water acting against it.
In fact, many of these structures are just that, a simple arch.
Arch dams are different than other dams because of the nature by which they resist the water forces. Most dams do so by the sheer weight or gravity. And arch dams do some of that because they have mass, but they're an arch tipped on its side, and it has arch action that thrusts the loads into the abutments, which are at the end of the arch. And those loads are resisted by the rock of the canyon. And they pretty much put the rock of the canyon into compression, which makes arch dams ideal for steep canyons, V-shaped, U-shaped canyons with good strong rock on either side, which is where you'll find most arch dams.
726 feet tall and up to 660 feet thick at its base, Hoover Dam was the largest concrete structure of its time. It required over 4.5 million cubic yards of concrete to build the massive arch. And it withstands the pressure of 9.2 trillion gallons of water in Lake Mead.
Because the water pressure comes from the depth. It's the hydrostatic pressure that comes from the depth of water that's supported. So, in fact, supporting a lake that's only 1 foot wide provides the exact same force that a lake that would be, 100 miles wide.
As dam designs became increasingly daring, relying more upon the strength of arches, dams became thinner and more refined. One such structure resides not far from Hoover Dam.
Glen Canyon is a beautiful arch. You can't deny that it's a very beautiful and and magnificent engineering marvel. It's more of a thinner section. It's more of a true arch.
With a thin concrete slab 710 feet high and 1,560 feet long at the top, the dam relies on the shape and characteristics of the arch to resist the force of the water behind it, while using a minimum of material to do so. It's 25 feet thick at the top and over 300 feet thick at its base, and is extremely strong for its relatively limited mass.
The idea of the arch dam is to keep everything in compression and to minimize the bending that goes on in an arch.
And if the dam can avoid tension, the enemy of any arch, and stay in compression, it can last for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. Dams are clear examples of the strength of the arch. But less obvious, yet familiar to us all, are tunnels, which use the strength of the arch deep underground.
Another example of arch action in which forces are redirected into compression is a tunnel. Many of us drive through tunnels on our daily commute. You'd have to ask yourself, where does the weight of all of the soil and rock above the tunnel go? It has to get redirected. It has to go around the tunnel. And it goes around the tunnel because of arch action.
While the Romans built small arch tunnels, the craft of modern tunneling really started in England in 1825, when Mark Brunel took on the great challenge of digging beneath the River Thames.
In the case of Brunel's tunnel under the Thames, that if he'd built just one large tunnel, one large opening, he was concerned about the loading coming from the sides failing the tunnel. And so what he did was he introduced a central pier with two kind of arches that were bearing on that central column. He was concerned about the size of the forces, so he cut the span in half by adding a central wall.
Brunel's innovative tunnel paved the way for something much bigger. Since before Brunel's time, engineers had dreamt of a tunnel under the English Channel, connecting Britain with France. This dream became reality in 1994. An arched cylinder was the perfect answer for the 31-mile run under the English Channel, up to 530 feet under the water's surface. These tunnels are 24 feet wide and are formed of a series of continuous arches, opposed to each other at an infinite number of points. In this application of the arch, the triple tubes are lined with a combination of concrete and iron compression rings, up to 23 inches thick. A cylindrical tunnel is an example of almost perfect compression, the best environment for an arched form. Just as the arch provides us access under the sea, so it provides passage over the sea. Without the arch, bridge building as we know it would be impossible. When built, the Channel Tunnel was the most expensive construction project ever conceived, with a price tag of $21 billion. The arch will return on Modern Marvels, here on the History Channel. The wider the valley, the longer the bridge. And arched structures are often the best solution to that age-old question, how to get to the other side. Once again, the Romans got there first.